The letter from the United States Patent and Trademark Office landed on my desk at exactly 9:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. Subject line: Re-E. Application conflict. U.S. Patent Application 18947-382. I didn't need to open it to know what it said. I'd been expecting this letter for 3 weeks, ever since my former boss, Trevor Ashford, tried to claim ownership of 5 years of my life's work. What Trevor didn't know, what nobody at Apex Biomedical knew, was that I'd been documenting every single email, every lab note, every conversation, and every technical decision since the day I started this project. Every timestamp, every witness signature, every GitHub commit with my name on it. The patent office was about to learn something Trevor should have known from the beginning. You can steal credit in a boardroom, but you can't steal it from federal records. My name is Marcus Brennan. I'm 51 years old, and I just watched a 30-year-old try to patent my invention. This is what happened when he found out I keep better records than the NSA. Let me back up to show you how we got here. 26 years ago, I was an electronics technician in the Air Force, stationed at Edwards Air Force Base in California. 5 years of working on guidance systems for aircraft taught me something valuable about complex systems. Everything is connected, and if you don't document the connections, you're building a house of cards. When a $60 million fighter jet depends on circuits you maintained, you learn to write everything down, every test, every modification, every observation. That discipline saved lives in the military. It would save my career in civilian life. I joined Apex Biomedical in Austin back in 1999, right after leaving the service. The company was small then, maybe 40 people, focused on developing monitoring devices for diabetic patients. I started as a junior biomedical engineer, the guy who tested other people's designs and wrote technical reports nobody read. But I read everything. Every patent in our field, every FDA regulation, every competitor's product teardown. Within 2 years, I was leading my own projects. The company grew. By 2005, we had 200 employees and 3 FDA-approved devices on the market. I'd accumulated something more valuable than promotions or salary bumps. I'd become the person who actually understood how our core technology worked. When the senior engineers couldn't figure out why a sensor was giving inconsistent readings, they called me. When the FDA asked technical questions during audits, they put me in the room. I wasn't the loudest voice in meetings or the guy with the impressive degrees on the wall. I was the guy who made things work. In 2012, my wife Ellen died from complications related to type 1 diabetes. She was 39 years old. Our daughter Claire was only 9. Watching Ellen struggle with glucose monitoring that never quite worked right, watching her try to manage insulin dosing with imperfect information, watching the technology fail her when she needed it most. That changed everything for me. I started working on what would become my life's work, a fully implantable, continuously calibrating glucose monitor that could transmit real-time data with 99.7% accuracy. I didn't ask for permission or wait for company approval. I started the research on my own time in the lab after hours, documenting every experiment in personal lab notebooks that I kept locked in my desk. By 2015, I had proof of concept. By 2017, I had a working prototype that outperformed every competitor device on the market. That's when I brought it to the company officially. Senior management saw dollar signs immediately. This wasn't just an incremental improvement. This was potentially a billion-dollar device that could revolutionize diabetes care. They greenlit Project Sentinel, gave me a team of 6 engineers, and a budget that actually matched the scope. But here's what I did that nobody paid attention to. I made sure every single piece of documentation, every email, every technical decision went through me and was archived with timestamps. I set up automated backup systems that copied every file to secure cloud storage with metadata intact. I kept my original lab notebooks in a safe deposit box. I had my patent attorney, Sandra Kovac, review my documentation protocols to make sure everything would hold up under legal scrutiny if needed. Why would I do all this if I trusted my company? Because Ellen's death had taught me something about the medical device industry. Companies care about ownership more than they care about inventors. I'd seen too many engineers lose credit for their work, too many innovations stolen by executives who contributed nothing but their signature on approval forms. I wasn't going to let that happen to the device I'd created for Ellen's memory. For 5 years, I led Project Sentinel. My team and I went through 47 prototype iterations, 312 clinical trial participants, and 14 rounds of FDA submissions. I wrote every significant piece of code myself. I designed the sensor architecture, the calibration algorithms, the data transmission protocols. I could show you the exact timestamp of every major innovation, the name of every person in the room when key decisions were made, and the technical reasoning behind every design choice. Claire was 15 now, a sophomore in high school with her mother's quick mind and her father's stubbornness. She'd grown up watching me work late nights and weekends on Project Sentinel. I'd missed some of her volleyball games, some parent-teacher conferences, some of those small moments you don't get back, but she understood why. "You're building this for Mom, aren't you?" She'd asked me one night when she found me working at the kitchen table at midnight. "And for people like Mom," I'd said, "so other daughters don't lose their mothers the way you lost yours." That conversation happened 3 months before Trevor Ashford joined Apex Biomedical as Vice President of Research and Development. He was 30 years old, fresh from Stanford with an MBA and a degree in biomedical engineering. His uncle Gerald Ashford was our CEO and majority shareholder. Trevor had spent exactly 0 days in an actual research lab before taking a position overseeing all of them. His first week, Trevor scheduled one-on-ones with every department head. When my turn came, he spent 40 minutes asking me to explain Project Sentinel in detail. I walked him through the technology, the clinical trials, the FDA approval process we were in the middle of. He took notes on his iPad, nodding frequently, asking surprisingly intelligent questions for someone with no real-world experience. "This is incredible work, Marcus," he said at the end of our meeting. "Truly groundbreaking. I can see why Uncle Gerald speaks so highly of you." I should have heard the warning in that sentence. I should have recognized the possessive tone when he started saying "our device" and "our innovation" instead of giving credit where it belonged. But I'd been at Apex for 20 years. I trusted the institution, if not the individual. The problems started slowly. Trevor began inserting himself into technical meetings he didn't need to attend. He'd interrupt my presentations to executives, rephrasing my explanations in business school language that stripped out the actual technical content. "What Marcus is trying to say," he'd begin, before saying something that wasn't what I was trying to say at all. He started copying himself on every email thread related to Project Sentinel, adding comments that ranged from obvious to incorrect. In March, 6 months after Trevor joined, we received preliminary FDA approval for clinical trials of the final Sentinel prototype. This was huge, the last major regulatory hurdle before commercial manufacturing. I'd been working toward this moment for 5 years, ever since the night I'd sketched the first sensor design in my lab notebook while thinking about Ellen. I prepared a presentation for the board of directors, detailing the technical innovations that made Sentinel possible, the clinical trial results, and the path to market. I'd given hundreds of technical presentations over my career, but this one mattered. This was Ellen's legacy. The board meeting was scheduled for 2 p.m. on a Thursday. At 1:30 p.m., Trevor's assistant called me. "Trevor needs to see you immediately." I walked to his office, presentation materials under my arm. He was standing at his window, looking out over downtown Austin like he owned the skyline. "Marcus, about the board presentation," he said without turning around. "I'll be delivering it." I stopped walking, Excuse me? As VP of Research, it's appropriate that I present our achievements to the board. You understand? Optics matter. Having senior leadership present shows the board we're serious about commercializing Sentinel. Our achievements, not my achievement. Our. Trevor, I've been leading this project for 5 years. I designed every component. I ran every trial. The board should hear about it from the person who built it. Now he turned around, and his expression was what people probably mean when they say someone looked at them like they were furniture. Marcus, you're a talented engineer. Nobody disputes that. But you're not leadership material. You don't have the strategic vision to explain why Sentinel matters in the broader market context. That's my job. I stood there holding technical slides I'd spent 3 days preparing, looking at someone who'd been in the medical device industry for exactly 6 months, who was telling me I didn't have the vision to present my own work. Something settled in my chest, something cold and calculating. You'll need these slides then, I said, handing them over. Make sure you understand the technical details. The board members ask specific questions. Trevor barely glanced at the materials. I'll have my assistant clean up the formatting. Your slides are always too technical anyway. The board doesn't need to know how the device works, just that it works and how much money it'll make. I walked back to my lab without another word. That afternoon, I watched from the back of the boardroom as Trevor presented my 5 years of work as if he'd been involved from the beginning. He used phrases like, when I designed the calibration system and my approach to sensor architecture, and under my leadership, we achieved. My team sat silent in their chairs, exchanging glances but saying nothing. Trevor's uncle Gerald beamed with pride at his nephew's presentation. The other board members took notes, asked questions that Trevor answered with confident ignorance, and thanked him for his innovative work. After the meeting, as board members were filing out, Gerald Ashford pulled Trevor aside. I was close enough to hear him say, "Brilliant work, son. This device could be your ticket to CEO someday. Revolutionary innovation like this. That's the kind of legacy that matters." I went home that night and opened my safe deposit box. Inside were 5 years of lab notebooks, documentation, correspondence with Sandra Kovac about patent filing strategies, and backup drives containing every email and file from Project Sentinel. I sat at my kitchen table and made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to fight Trevor in meetings or appeal to management or trust that the right people would eventually recognize the truth. I was going to do what I'd learned in the Air Force. Document everything, follow procedures exactly, and let the system work the way it was designed to work. And in the patent system, the person who can prove they invented something first is the person who owns it. Period. Starting that night, I began preparing for war. But the kind of war Trevor wouldn't see coming until it was too late. The kind fought with timestamps and witness signatures and federal procedures that don't care how expensive your MBA was or who your uncle is. The next morning, I arrived at work at 7 a.m. like always. But instead of jumping into technical work, I spent the first hour systematically organizing my documentation. Every email from the past 5 years related to Project Sentinel, sorted, categorized, exported with full headers showing timestamps and recipients. Every lab notebook entry, photographed and uploaded to secure storage with metadata preserved. Every technical drawing, compared against the original files to verify no alterations had been made. I also did something else. I started copying Trevor on absolutely nothing. If he wanted credit for my work, he could do it without my active participation. I stopped attending meetings where he would be present unless specifically required. When team members asked me to brief Trevor on technical issues, I directed them to send written requests through official channels, which I then answered in detailed written responses with timestamps. Wesley Price, my senior hardware engineer, noticed immediately. "Marcus, Trevor's been asking for updates on the sensor calibration modifications. You want me to brief him?" "Send him the technical report we filed last week," I replied. "Everything he needs is documented there." Wesley looked uncomfortable. He said he wants to discuss it personally. "Get your perspective." "My perspective is in the report. Section 4.7, pages 23 through 31. Every decision is explained with technical justification and test data." By the second week of my new documentation protocol, Trevor's assistant was leaving increasingly urgent voicemails. By the third week, Trevor himself called me directly. "Marcus, I need you in my office. Now." I walked upstairs at exactly 2:30 p.m., notebook in hand. Trevor was pacing behind his desk, the kind of agitated energy that comes from someone used to getting their way, encountering friction. "What's going on with you? You're not responding to my requests. You're not attending strategic planning sessions. You're basically ghosting the entire executive team." "I've responded to every official request in writing," I said calmly. "As for strategic planning sessions, I'm a senior engineer, not leadership. I focus on technical execution. That's what you said last month. I'm not leadership material." His face reddened. "Don't twist my words. I need you engaged with the vision for Sentinel's commercial launch. The vision is documented in the project charter, which I wrote in 2019. The technical roadmap is in the quarterly reports I submit. Everything you need to know about Sentinel is already written down. But I need your expertise in meetings. I need you to explain technical details to potential investors." I looked at him directly for the first time in the conversation. "You told the board of directors you designed the calibration system. You said you led the development. If you need me to explain technical details, what exactly did you contribute?" The silence lasted maybe 5 seconds, but it felt longer. "Get out of my office," Trevor said quietly. "I'll document this conversation as insubordination." "Please do," I replied. "Make sure you include the date and time in your documentation. Details matter in official records." I walked out, went back to my lab, and added notes about our conversation to my personal log. Time, date, exact words exchanged, just like I'd been doing for everything else. 2 weeks later, Trevor called an all-hands meeting for Project Sentinel. The entire team gathered in the main conference room. Wesley, Isabel Torres from software, Ming Chen from clinical trials, everyone who'd worked on Sentinel over the years. Trevor stood at the front with a PowerPoint presentation that made my skin crawl the moment I saw the title slide. Sentinel, a revolutionary innovation by Trevor Ashford, VP of Research. For 40 minutes, I watched him present the technical history of a device he'd had nothing to do with creating. He described challenges he hadn't faced, solutions he hadn't developed, and breakthroughs he hadn't achieved. My team sat in uncomfortable silence, occasionally glancing at me to see if I was going to say anything. I didn't. I just took notes. At the end of his presentation, Trevor announced something that made my blood stop moving for a second. "I'm pleased to inform you all that I'll be filing a patent application for the Sentinel technology next week. This device represents the pinnacle of my career in biomedical engineering, and I'm excited to have my name associated with such a significant innovation." Isabel's mouth actually opened. Wesley looked like someone had punched him. Ming Chen stared at the table like it might offer answers about what was happening. Nobody said a word. After the meeting ended and people filed out in stunned silence, Wesley pulled me aside. "Marcus, you can't let him do this. You invented Sentinel." "Everyone knows it." "Everyone knows it," I agreed. "But can everyone prove it?" That evening I called Sandra Kovac, the patent attorney I'd been working with since 2017. "Sandra, I need to accelerate something we discussed." "The patent application?" she asked. "I thought you were waiting for final FDA approval before filing." Plans changed. How fast can we prepare a comprehensive filing? There was a pause. If you have all your documentation organized the way we discussed, I can have a preliminary application ready in 72 hours. But Marcus, filing costs money. A comprehensive patent application for medical device technology like this is going to run $40,000 to $50,000 in legal fees. I'd been saving for Claire's college fund. MIT or Stanford, wherever she wanted to go, Ellen and I had promised her that. The fund had about $65,000 in it. Sandra, I need you to prepare the most comprehensive, bulletproof patent application possible. Every technical detail documented, every innovation time-stamped, every piece of prior art researched, whatever it costs. Marcus, what's going on? Someone's trying to steal 5 years of my life. I need you to make sure the federal government knows who really invented Sentinel. For the next 4 days, Sandra and I worked late into the night. She'd request documentation, I'd provide it. Emails showing technical discussions I'd led years before Trevor joined the company. Lab notebooks with witness signatures from 2018. GitHub commits showing I'd written the core algorithm code. Photographs of prototype iterations with timestamps from 2019 and 2020. Every piece of evidence was cross-referenced, verified, and included in the application. Marcus, this is the most thoroughly documented invention I've seen in 20 years of patent law, Sandra said on the third night. You have proof of conception, proof of reduction to practice, proof of continuous development. You have witness corroboration from multiple team members. You even have email threads where you're explaining technical concepts to people who clearly didn't understand them. Trevor, I asked, among others. But yes, there are multiple emails where you're literally teaching him how the device you invented actually works. On Friday afternoon, exactly 72 hours after my call to Sandra, we filed a provisional patent application with the United States Patent and Trademark Office. Application number 18947381. Inventor, Marcus James Brennan. Filed date and time, April 14th, 2023, at 4:47 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Title, Implantable Glucose Monitoring System with Continuous Adaptive Calibration. The provisional application established my priority date, the moment the Patent Office officially recognized when I invented Sentinel. Everything would be measured against this time stamp. Anyone who tried to file a similar patent after this date would be fighting an uphill battle against federally documented proof. I didn't tell anyone at Apex what I'd done. I just waited. Trevor filed his patent application 11 days later, on April 25th. Application number 18947382. Inventor, Trevor William Ashford. The title was nearly identical to mine, the technical description borrowed heavily from my documentation, and the claims covered exactly the same innovations I described in my own filing. He'd literally taken my technical specifications and submitted them under his name. What Trevor didn't know was that when you file a patent application, the Patent Office searches for similar pending applications. When their automated systems flagged the overlap between his application and mine, they sent both of us notices. Application conflict, resolution required. That's when the war became official. The letter from the Patent Office arrived at my desk on a Tuesday morning, the one I mentioned at the beginning of the story. It detailed the conflict, noted that both applications claimed substantially similar technology, and stated that both parties would need to provide evidence of inventorship and priority. There would be an investigation. There would be interviews. Someone was going to have to prove they invented Sentinel first. I had 5 years of time-stamped evidence. Trevor had 11 days and his uncle's last name. The math wasn't even close. The Patent Office assigned our case to a senior examiner named Patricia Drummond, who had 30 years of experience evaluating inventorship disputes in medical device technology. She scheduled interviews with both Trevor and me, requested all supporting documentation, and made it clear she took patent fraud extremely seriously. "Whoever is lying about inventorship is committing a federal crime," she told both of us in separate calls. "I will find the truth, and there will be consequences." Trevor's first response was to call an emergency meeting with Gerald Ashford, the company's general counsel, and the entire executive team. I was summoned to the conference room at 9 a.m. on a Wednesday morning like I was being called to the principal's office. Trevor sat at the head of the table, his uncle beside him, and the lawyers arrayed around them like a defense perimeter. "Marcus, what the hell is this?" Gerald asked, sliding a copy of my patent application across the table. "You filed a patent application for company technology without authorization." I looked at the document. "That's not company technology. That's my technology, which I developed and disclosed to the company under our standard invention disclosure procedures. Everything you create while employed here belongs to Apex Biomedical," the general counsel said. "Your employment contract is very clear on this point." "You're right," I agreed. "Everything I create using company resources, during company time, belongs to the company. That's why I'm not claiming ownership. I'm claiming inventorship. Those are different things." Trevor leaned forward, and I could see he was trying to look calm, but his hands were shaking slightly. "Marcus, I don't think you understand the situation. You're jeopardizing a billion-dollar device over some ego problem about credit." "Interesting," I said. 3 weeks ago you told the board of directors you designed this device. Now you're saying it's mine." The general counsel held up a hand. "Let's not make this adversarial. Marcus, the company is willing to add you as a co-inventor on Trevor's patent application. You'll get recognition, and we can move forward with commercialization." "Trevor's patent application was filed 11 days after mine," I replied. "The patent office considers the earlier filing date when both applications cover the same technology. My application has priority." Gerald's face was getting red now. "We can fight your application. We have the resources to bury you in legal fees." "You could try," I agreed, "but I've already spent $50,000 preparing my application with a patent attorney who specializes in interference proceedings, and I have something you don't have." "What's that?" Trevor asked. I pulled out my tablet and opened a folder that contained hundreds of files. "Proof. 5 years of lab notebooks with witness signatures. Email threads from 2018 showing me explaining technical concepts that ended up in the Sentinel design. GitHub commits from 2019 with my username creating the core algorithms. Photographs of prototypes from 2020 that match the patent specifications. Correspondence with FDA officials from 2021 about clinical trial protocols I personally designed. Would you like me to continue?" The room went very quiet. "You've been documenting everything," the general counsel said slowly. "Since the beginning," I confirmed. "Every experiment, every design decision, every technical breakthrough. All time-stamped, all backed up, all with witness corroboration, where applicable. The patent office is going to ask both Trevor and me to prove who invented Sentinel first. I can prove it." "Can Trevor?" Trevor's face had gone from red to white. "Marcus, I've led this project." "For 6 months," I interrupted. "I've led it for 5 years, and I can prove every claim I make about my involvement." "Can you?" Gerald stood up abruptly. "This meeting is over. Marcus, you're suspended pending investigation of this matter." "Investigation of what?" I asked calmly. "Filing a patent application is neither illegal nor against company policy." "Insubordination," Gerald said. "Refusal to cooperate with company interests." "Then I'll wait to hear from HR officially. Make sure they put everything in writing with dates and times. I'll want that documentation for my records." I walked out of the conference room and went directly home. Claire was in the living room doing homework when I arrived in the middle of the day. "Dad, why are you home early?" I just had a meeting where someone tried to steal credit for something I built over 5 years, I told her. How'd it go? They discovered I keep better records than they do. She grinned. That's the most dad answer ever. Over the next 3 weeks, the Patent Office investigation proceeded exactly how Sandra predicted it would. Patricia Drummond requested documentation from both Trevor and me. I submitted 200 pages of evidence, lab notebooks, emails, technical drawings, code repositories, witness statements from Wesley, Isabel and Ming Chen, photographs of prototypes, FDA correspondence, everything time-stamped and organized chronologically. Trevor submitted 15 pages that consisted mostly of meeting notes from 2023 and the PowerPoint presentation where he'd claimed credit for my work. Drummond scheduled video interviews. She asked Trevor detailed technical questions about Sentinel's design. Can you explain how the adaptive calibration algorithm compensates for tissue interface impedance changes over time? Trevor stumbled through an answer that demonstrated he didn't understand the mathematics underlying the system. Can you show me your original notes on the sensor array geometry? He couldn't. Can you explain why you chose the specific biocompatible coating formulation? He suggested I'd probably made that decision. My interview lasted 4 hours. Drummond asked me to explain every major innovation in Sentinel, and I walked through the technical reasoning behind each design choice, referenced to specific lab notebook entries where I documented the development process and provided timestamps for when each breakthrough occurred. Mr. Brennan, in 30 years of examining patent applications, I rarely see this level of documentation, she said at the end. You've proven inventorship beyond any reasonable doubt. I learned in the Air Force that if something matters, you write it down, I replied. This mattered. 2 weeks later, I received a letter from the Patent Office. The subject line was, Resolution of Application Conflict, Case 2023, IT 000847. I opened it in my kitchen with Claire reading over my shoulder. The letter stated that after thorough investigation, the Patent Office had determined that Marcus James Brennan was the true and sole inventor of the technology described in both applications. Trevor Ashford's application was being rejected for false inventorship claims. My application was being advanced for examination. The letter included one more paragraph that made Claire whistle softly. This office has referred evidence of potential patent fraud to the United States Attorney's Office for the Western District of Texas for investigation. Falsely claiming inventorship on a federal patent application is a criminal offense under 18 U.S.C. Paragraph 1001. Trevor was being investigated for federal fraud. That was Tuesday. By Friday, the story had leaked to the entire company. By Monday, it was in the Austin Business Press. Apex Biomedical VP under federal investigation for patent fraud, read the headline. The article detailed how Trevor Ashford had attempted to claim credit for a device invented by senior engineer Marcus Brennan, and how the Patent Office had uncovered the fraud through documentary evidence. Gerald Ashford called an emergency board meeting. This time, I wasn't summoned. I was invited with a request that I bring my patent attorney. Sandra and I walked into the boardroom to find the entire board of directors present, along with the general counsel and several people I didn't recognize who turned out to be crisis management consultants. Marcus, please sit, Gerald said, and his voice had none of the anger from our last meeting. He sounded tired. We need to discuss how to resolve this situation. What situation? I asked. The Patent Office already resolved it. I'm the inventor. Trevor lied on a federal document. One of the crisis management consultants spoke up. Mr. Brennan, this situation is damaging to the company's reputation and could jeopardize our FDA approval process. We need to contain the fallout. The fallout from your VP committing federal fraud? I asked. That's Trevor's problem, not mine. Gerald leaned forward. Marcus, what will it take to make this go away quietly? Do you want Trevor's position? A seat on the board? Equity stake? I looked at Sandra, who gave me a small nod. We'd discussed this moment. Here's what I want. First, Trevor is terminated immediately and permanently barred from claiming any credit for Sentinel or any other technology I developed. Second, I want 15% of all revenue from Sentinel for the life of the patent, in addition to my salary. Third, I want a formal apology from this board acknowledging that Trevor attempted to steal my work and that the company failed to protect my intellectual property. Fourth, I want all of this in writing, signed by every person in this room. The silence was absolute. One of the board members finally spoke. 15% of revenue from $1 billion device? That's insane. No, I replied. What's insane is letting a 30-year-old with an MBA steal credit from the engineer who actually invented something, then expecting that engineer to accept a title and a handshake. Sentinel is my invention. I can license it to Apex, or I can license it to your competitors. Choose. They chose. Trevor was terminated that afternoon. Security escorted him out of the building while employees watched from office windows. His personal items were packed in a cardboard box, his access credentials deactivated, his name removed from all company directories. The board issued a formal statement acknowledging my inventorship and apologizing for the administrative confusion, corporate speak for "we let our executive's nephew commit federal fraud." The revenue sharing agreement was signed within a week. 15% of all Sentinel sales in perpetuity, with quarterly payments and full accounting transparency. Sandra estimated that over the life of the patent, I'd receive somewhere between $200 million and $500 million, depending on market penetration. But the consequences for Trevor went deeper than losing his job. The federal investigation continued. The U.S. Attorney's Office charged him with making false statements on a federal document, a crime that carries up to 5 years in prison. He pleaded guilty to a reduced charge and received 2 years probation, a $50,000 fine, and permanent prohibition from holding executive positions in companies with federal contracts. His MBA from Stanford couldn't protect him from a criminal record. The professional destruction was even more thorough. When you're convicted of patent fraud, that information becomes public record. Every future employer would Google his name and find the story. Every professional reference would have to explain what happened. He'd built his career on the assumption that his last name and his degree made him untouchable. The patent office proved otherwise. 6 months later, I stood in my lab watching the first commercial production units of Sentinel roll off the manufacturing line. Wesley, Isabel, and Ming Chen were there, along with Claire, who'd taken the afternoon off school to see the device her father had built in her mother's memory. Each unit bore a small inscription on the underside of the housing, designed by Marcus J. Brennan, patent US 11th 947,381. Gerald Ashford approached me on the manufacturing floor. Marcus, I owe you a personal apology. I let family loyalty blind me to what was happening. Trevor convinced me he'd been leading this project, and I wanted to believe him. I looked at the CEO who'd almost let his nephew steal my life's work. You didn't want to believe him. You wanted his success to reflect well on you. There's a difference. He nodded slowly. For what it's worth, the board voted to promote you to VP of Research and Development. Trevor's old position. You've earned it. I don't want Trevor's old position, I said. I want to be Chief Innovation Officer, reporting directly to the board, with full authority over all R&D portfolios and no obligation to attend executive meetings that waste my time. I want to spend my days building medical devices, not playing politics with people who don't understand the difference between leadership and theft. They gave me exactly what I asked for. Chief Innovation Officer Marcus Brennan with full creative authority, equity stake, and the freedom to work on projects that mattered. No executive busywork, no strategic planning theater, just the opportunity to do what I'd been doing for 26 years. Building technology that saved lives. That evening, Claire and I went to dinner to celebrate. Over burgers and fries, she asked the question I'd been expecting. "Dad, did you know from the beginning what Trevor was going to do?" I thought about that. I knew people like Trevor exist. People who think they deserve credit for work they didn't do because of their degree or their family or their title. I didn't know he'd go as far as federal fraud, but I prepared for the possibility that someone might try to steal what I'd built. That's why you documented everything. That's why I documented everything. She grinned. Mom would be proud of you, not just for Sentinel, but for standing up for yourself. Ellen would have been proud, I thought. She'd always told me I was too trusting, too willing to let others take credit as long as the work got done. She'd spent her last months encouraging me to protect my contributions, to make sure I got recognition for the innovations I created. Do it for Claire, she'd said. Show her that expertise and integrity matter more than connections and credentials. I'd done exactly that, and the patent office had agreed. The best response to someone stealing your work isn't rage or revenge. It's documentation so thorough that the truth becomes impossible to ignore. It's preparation so careful that when the theft happens, you're already 10 steps ahead, with evidence they can't refute. If you've ever watched someone take credit for your work, if you've ever seen a mediocre executive claim achievements they didn't earn, if you've ever wondered whether expertise matters in a world that rewards credentials and connections, remember this: the patent system doesn't care about your MBA or who your uncle is. It cares about one thing: who invented it first. And if you can prove that, no amount of corporate politics can steal what's yours. Trevor Ashford learned that lesson the hard way. His career destroyed, his reputation ruined, his criminal record permanent, all because he thought a title gave him the right to claim innovations he didn't create. Meanwhile, the engineer he tried to steal from became one of the wealthiest innovators in medical device technology, built technology that will save millions of lives, and taught his daughter that integrity and preparation beat privilege every single time. Document everything. Time-stamp everything. Protect your work like your career depends on it, because someday it might. And when that day comes, you'll want to be the person with the receipts, not the person facing federal fraud charges for lying about what you built. Subscribe if you want more stories about what happens when credential worship crashes into actual competence. Trust me, the patent office keeps excellent records.